Hi, my friends! Welcome to the third lesson in our Drawing Fundamentals series. Today, we'll dive into different shading techniques and how they can bring more depth and texture to your drawings. If you haven't watched the previous lessons yet, you'll see a card pop up at the top. So today, we'll go through 6 essential shading methods, perfect for beginners and great for those looking to refine their skills. And now, let's quickly go over all 6 shading methods. Hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, circulism or circular shading, smudging, mixed technique. Now, let's explore each one in detail. To demonstrate these shading techniques, I'll be using a sphere since it's a great way to practice smooth transitions between light and shadow. For the first method, we're using hatching, a technique where parallel lines in the same direction create shading. I start by making small clusters of strokes, carefully spacing them out. Then, I continue shading the entire area, gradually layering more strokes to build depth and smooth transitions. As I keep adding layers, you'll notice how the shading naturally transitions into a gradient. You can also experiment by adjusting the pressure on your pencil or switching to a softer, darker one as you move toward the shadowed areas. Next, we have cross-hatching, which builds on the same principle as hatching, but adds an extra layer for more depth. First, I start with regular hatching, drawing parallel lines in one direction. Then, I add a second layer, this time changing the direction of my strokes, hence the name cross-hatching. The more layers I add, the denser and darker the shading becomes. To create a smoother effect, I shorten my strokes as I go, especially in the midtones. For this demonstration, I am using random directions, but you can also make your lines follow the curve of the sphere to enhance the sense of form. Let's move on to the next technique, stippling. Now, let's try stippling, a technique that uses small dots to create shading and depth. I start by placing dots closer together in the shadowed areas and gradually spacing them out as I move toward the lighter areas. The key to stippling is patience. Since we are building tone with tiny dots, it takes more time than other techniques, but the result can be very unique and textured. For smoother transitions, I adjust the density of the dots rather than their size. The more concentrated they are, the darker area appears. You can also experiment with different tools like fine-tip pens for an even more precise effect. Stippling is especially useful for capturing the texture of various botanical objects, as it allows for delicate and precise tonal transitions. Unlike traditional hatching, which can sometimes create harsher shading, stippling builds up tone gradually, making it perfect for soft, organic forms. I often use this technique in my botanical illustrations, particularly when working with gel pens. Since hatching can sometimes produce sharp contrast, stippling helps me achieve a smoother and more refined shading effect, enhancing the natural look of plants and flowers. Alright, let's move on to the next technique. For the next technique, we need to sharpen our pencil to a fine point, exposing more of the graphite to create a longer, smoother surface. Holding the pencil at a low angle, we gently press it close to the paper and begin shading using small circular motions. This method, known as circulism or circular shading, allows us to create a soft, velvety texture. Unlike hatching or stippling, where strokes or dots remain visible, circulism blends naturally, making it ideal for shading organic forms like tree leaves, bushes, or soft textures. I prefer using an overhand grip, holding the pencil at a low angle to shade with the side of the tip. This helps achieve a much smoother and more realistic gradient. The key here is layering. Just like with other shading techniques, the more layers we build up, the darker the shading becomes. If you are new to this method, it might feel a bit tricky at first, but with practice it becomes much easier. For the next technique, I take my pencil and gently shade the surface, making sure that the strokes are soft and not too visible. The goal is to create a smooth, even tone without any obvious lines. I focus on achieving a uniform shading across the surface. After that, to blend the graphite and create a softer, more seamless effect, I use a blending tool like a blending stump, a tissue, or in my case just my finger. With light, circular motions, I gently smooth the graphite so that it spreads evenly across the surface. This allows the shading to transition smoothly from light to dark without harsh lines. And that's the secret! This technique is perfect for achieving soft, smooth gradients, which is great for creating realistic shadows and textures in your drawings. Now let's take it a step further and combine different techniques to achieve a more dynamic and realistic effect. For the darker areas, I use smudging to soften the shadows, creating a smoother, more blended effect. In the lighter areas, I try to keep the strokes visible, which helps maintain texture and gives the surface a more natural, organic feel. This contrast between the texturing lighting and the blended shadows not only enhances depth, but also gives the drawing a sense of dimension. By mixing this technique, you get the best of both worlds: sharp, detailed areas where they are needed, and soft, smooth transitions in the shadows. This approach works particularly well when drawing organic forms like skin, fabric, or natural objects, where a combination of texture and smoothness helps bring everything to life. Great jobs, friends! We've covered 6 basic shading techniques today. I hope this video was helpful for you. In the next lesson, we'll combine everything we've learned so far and draw an entire object step by step. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a like and leave a comment. That's it for today, and I'll see you in the next video.